Hello, and welcome to The Marketing Architects, a research-first podcast dedicated to answering your toughest marketing questions. I'm Elena Hingle. I run the marketing team here at Marketing Architects, and today I am joined by my two co-hosts, Angela Voss, our CEO, and Rob DeMars, our Chief Creative Officer.
Hello!
Today we are back with our thoughts on some recent marketing news, always trying to root our opinions in data, research, and what drives business results. So today we're going to be talking about a story from the New York Times that gained quite a bit of buzz in the marketing community a few weeks ago. And the title of that story is, "If it's advertised to you online, you probably shouldn't buy it. Here's why." Pretty spicy, if you ask
Every
me.
move you make, every
geez.
breath. You told me I should sing that in the intro, Elena. So
That is
I'm
not
doing
on this recording. I didn't know such thing. So this article, it was originally sent to me by our head of legal. So it's a guest essay in the Times. It was authored by Julia Angwin, I believe is how you say her last name, on the societal impact of online advertising. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about what the article says. It starts off by describing essentially what behavioral advertising is. And the author, she talks about how tech firms track your clicks from various websites. They develop profiles of your interests and desires and sell that data to advertisers. So to sum it up for the layperson that's reading the Times, she says, this sort of advertising is, quote, those creepy ads in your Instagram feed or on websites that seem to know what you were just talking about. And in the article, she goes on to say that this ability to track people has allowed the online ad industry to grow to a whopping $540 billion market worldwide and dwarf other kinds of advertising, the kinds that we like TV, radio, out of home, and print. And the author then begins sort of the main point of the article, that the rise of tracking-based advertising, aka micro-targeting, or even what she sometimes describes as surveillance, as a surveillance business model, has come with a huge price tag to both society and consumers. And she lists out a few reasons why. One of these reasons is that it's helped traditional news outlets go out of business, with global newspaper revenue plummeting from $107 billion in 2000 to $32 billion last year. She references studies showing voting decreases and corruption increases in communities without strong news outlets. Another reason she gives is discrimination. Microtargeting makes it easier to discriminate in ways that are difficult for regulators to uncover, since you can hide some of your preferences in these algorithms. And then she also talks about how politicians have used targeted advertising to influence certain groups of voters. But then the part of the article that really caught my attention as a marketer was when she referenced this study from researchers at Carnegie Mellon and Virginia Tech on, quote, consumer welfare implications of targeted ads. And I think this is the really juicy stuff for marketers, in my opinion. This study was conducted last year, but it was just published online a few weeks ago because these findings were so shocking, they actually repeated the study again before publishing it. And I read this study myself, and I'm going to summarize it in a moment, but before I get into that, I thought it'd be helpful if we define some terms, because there are a lot of different terms being used here, both in the article and the study. They refer to these ads as targeted ads, but the study also uses the term behavioral advertising or behavioral targeting. They also both reference contextual advertising or contextual targeting. And when I posted this on LinkedIn, I shared the article, and I got called out by Bob Hoffman himself, who, if you don't know who Bob Hoffman is, pretty famous advertising guy. He writes a lot about data privacy and consumers, and he talked about the difference between targeted advertising and behavioral advertising and tracking-based advertising. So given that, I'm going to pass it off to Angela and let you try to navigate these tricky waters of these different terms instead of me, because I got in trouble.
Well, the digital environment in general, I think, related to CTV, we've had a lot of discussions around the verbiage and trying to just all be saying the same thing, I think sometimes is a challenge. So it's probably fair. So when we think about behavioral targeting, this is what sometimes I've called audience targeting or micro-targeting. What you're thinking about there is really like segmenting customers based on web browsing behavior, right? Including things like pages visited, searches performed, links clicked, products purchased, And so in a B2C sense, my online shopping behavior probably predicts me to be a fan of water sports. In a B2B sense, my online browsing behavior, the articles I read, the searches I perform, the sites that I visit, would behaviorally segment me as a marketer, potentially a decision maker, that sort of thing. So visitors with these similar behaviors are then grouped into defined audience segments, which allow advertisers to target them with specific relevant ads. And relevant, right? That's a topic that are they relevant? Are they not? And content based on their browsing and their purchase history. Site retargeting would be a form of behavioral, but in that case, you're using your own data. And the problem that exists with behavioral targeting is that much of it relies on third-party cookies, right? Which have already started to disappear and they will continue to. Contextual, on the other hand, involves displaying ads based on a website's content. So think running shoes being displayed on a running forum. In a B2B sense, if you see an advertisement about accounting software on a website dedicated to helping businesses manage their financials, that's likely contextual targeting. And contextual targeting is gaining steam due to its ability to drive performance. And I think a lot of marketers are looking to this type of targeting as a fallback due to the loss of the third-party cookie, but it generally is a little more traditional in terms of how we've thought about targeting consumers in the past. You're trying to understand what do they like and what might they be interested in, and pushing advertising towards those channels for the purpose of getting in front of them. Is that helpful? I hope.
So Ange, can I so I did not go to Carnegie Mellon. I know you guys are going to be shocked on that, and nor do I work in our analytics department. So can I try to say what you just said and see if I'm actually right? Which is, let's say I go to IMDb, right? The Internet Movie Database. I love Internet Movie Database. And I'm checking out the show The Office because I want to read a bio on one of the actors. And while I'm on there, they show me this Schrute Farms t-shirt, right? And I'm like, ooh, I gotta own that. So I buy that. And when I buy it, now all of a sudden they're like cookieing me. Like I got like cookies stuck to me. And so now I am off and on reading up on my other hobby, Macs, right? I'm on macrumors.com. And so the fact that I saw an ad for the Schrute Farms t-shirt on the IMDb website would be an example of contextual advertising, right? Because I'm on a website that's featuring content that is The Office, versus now I wander from that and I've got this cookie stuck to me and I go to macrumors.com, and for some reason now they're showing me an ad for a mug for Dunder Mifflin in a banner ad. So that would be considered then behavioral targeting?
Aside from the fact that I don't watch The Office, but I'm piecing together what you're saying. I think you're hired for the analytics team.
Yes.
I think you've got it down.
Thank you, Rob, for breaking that down for us in Rob terms. We appreciate it. So I think that it's safe to say, are we all okay if I call this behavioral advertising from now on, this type of advertising?
Yes.
I know there's a lot of different ways to say it, and you mentioned the difference between first-party data and third-party data for behavioral, and we're going to get into more of the impacts of that later. But for the sake of clarity, I know people have called this tracking-based advertising. I'm going to call it behavioral advertising, mostly because that's what the study calls it. So from here on out, that's what we're doing. So to get back to the summary of the study, in the study, the researchers, they start off by claiming that the value consumers receive from behavioral advertising has not been empirically demonstrated. It's been talked about, yes, and personally, I've seen dozens of articles that claim behavioral advertising helps better match us to products we want to buy. Rob, you're a fan of The Office. Getting targeted with a mug about The Office is something that you're interested in. However, most of the empirical work on the effectiveness of behavioral advertising has been measured in terms of clicks and conversion rates. Just benefits to advertisers, not actual benefits to customers. So these researchers, they set up 2 online within subject experiments. They called these Study 1 and Study 2, and they designed them to assess some of the consumer welfare implications of behaviorally targeted advertising. They had about 1,000 participants and over 7,000 data points across the 3 subject conditions. So essentially, they were trying to measure the extent to which these behaviorally targeted ads really benefit the customer. What's the quality of the products these ads are pushing? How often are they from brands the consumer is totally unaware of? How does their price compare to other products a consumer might find online? I'm going to quote directly from the study here for clarity. Both studies use the same design. In the first stage, they asked participants to browse randomly selected websites on their own computers and browsers and provide us with the URLs of the ads displayed to them on those websites. So they would send them the address that the participant's browser would visit if they clicked on a certain ad. In an interstage phase, they used automated scripts in Google to search products competing with those advertised to the participants. So they were just searching for similar products. In a second stage, which occurred around a week after the first, participants were shown in random order the products from the ads that had been displayed to them, the competing products obtained from the organic results of those online searches, and then randomly selected products. For each product, they captured the objective metrics. These would be things like price, third-party data on vendor quality, and self-reported metrics, such as the participants' self-reported assessments of purchase intentions, product quality, price fairness, relevance, and novelty of product type, brand, and vendor. They then used all of this to evaluate the consumer welfare effects by comparing these objectives and self-reported metrics across the three conditions. So I hope you followed that kind of little complicated setup, but what they found is what's interesting. So both the ads and the organic search results were dominated by a few vendors. However, the ads were more likely to contain less popular, less familiar vendors. That means that those ads, for the most part, were helping smaller brands reach customers. And second, purchase intent was higher in the ad and search conditions, driven by higher product relevance. However, average product relevance was low across all the conditions. So products found from ads and search were more relevant than products found randomly, but not highly relevant to the participants overall. And third, what I think is the most important piece, the behaviorally targeted ads in both studies were more likely to be associated with lower quality vendors and higher prices when comparing identical products relative to competing alternatives found in search results. Again, I think this is the most interesting part for marketers because it debunks the idea that these ads are presenting overall, better products to people. So, Ange, before we move on, what's your reaction to this study? When you went through it, did you feel the same way I did, that this is some new information about this type of advertising?
Yeah, I don't know that I've seen this view, this side of the conversation, right? So often we've looked at this topic from the marketer side and have looked to quantify helpful relevance, maybe in the forms of, is the product selling? And is that targeting working? Not necessarily the consumer side of, are they really getting to the best product? Do they find that helpful and relevant? And is the price right? But I guess there's a bit of this personalization paradox for consumers. Some might find that behavioral targeting is extremely helpful. Others may not. I generally like to control my own buying path. But of course, on occasion, I have, just like most, probably fallen to an impulse purchase. I know Rob's fallen to lots of impulse purchases off a display ad or something. And those haven't always been the best purchases that I've made, be it price or quality of product. But I will say from the marketer side, it's hard to take that hat off with less options like this for startups and small brands. It does make it a heck of a lot harder, right, to break in to a meaningful share of your space. And I think would just create, the value of brand just becomes even more important if you don't have those opportunities. But what do you think, Rob?
Well, isn't that the point that you're advertising? So, I feel like this study, and maybe I'm just reading between the lines here, they're saying like it's something diabolical that, the people are being presented with lesser known products than the other, but that's why these companies are paying to show up on Google. It's not like it's organic search where, that might then show the true popularity of a particular item, but these are smaller brands trying to make a presence in a space. You'd kind of assume they would be lesser known products because they're paying money to get eyeballs on it.
Right. I think you're right. But what stood out to me is a lot of times we hear arguments for this type of tracking that, hey, it's better for consumers. You're going to get more relevant products. It's going to be better for you. And I think that's an argument that's been brought up even in front of the government as a case for advertising. And what I'm wondering is, with this, that argument sort of falls apart. And when you don't have that, a lot of consumers, like Ange just said, she likes to control her own purchase path. For me, that's not a good trade-off then. I don't want you tracking everything I'm doing and following me around online. So I think you're right. But what I wonder with this is this actually very significant? Because it takes apart a little bit that argument that this is actually better for us.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think that feels like a little bit of altruistic spin by Google and others to go, well, this is better for the consumer. It's like, well, most of their revenue comes from Google ads. So I think they're it's probably beyond just doing it for altruistic means.
When we're talking about $1 billion industry. So when we're having government conversations about tracking, like that's how there's a lot at stake, right? This isn't a light conversation. So it's meaningful.
If you're a marketer, you already know TV advertising is powerful, but launching TV is not exactly easy. That's why Marketing Architects rebuilt TV advertising to help brands drive profitable growth. Introducing All-Inclusive TV, a revolutionary approach to TV advertising where all you pay for is media. Marketing Architects provides everything else needed for success, from stunning creative to results you can trust. Visit marketingarchitects.com to learn more. Now, the debate over this kind of morality around this advertising, it's a can of worms I don't really want to open today, but the good news is there's plenty of other things to discuss based on this article. One I know we're passionate about is marketing performance, and you already referenced that.
I'm keeping a can of worms in the fridge. If you ever want to open it up, it'll be ready for you.
I know you've got plenty of sardines in there. I used to see them in your office every day.
Gross.
It's true. So, and you mentioned performance. Like, are there performance gains from this type of advertising? So if the study's right, say behavioral targeting, it doesn't serve the consumer in this optimal way. What about the advertiser? Does behavioral targeting work better than contextual targeting? So is it working better than something that would protect consumers' privacy more? And our VP of technology, he recently went to an event where a giant tech company told a story about their experience with the performance of contextual versus behavioral targeting. It's sort of perfect time for us to have this discussion today. Would you mind telling us a little bit about what he learned?
Yeah, I definitely can. I think we can say the brand, right? It's public out on YouTube now, so folks can
put it on my LinkedIn, so it's public now.
Perfect. So our head of tech was recently asked to speak at Media Post Data and Programmatic Insider Summit, and what we're talking about today, to Elena's point, is really relevant here. So the global head of media at HP gave a talk on the research that they had recently done to uncover how dangerous behavioral targeting can be from a marketer standpoint. Now we're talking. So he talked about, everyone kind of within the walls of HP, and I think even outside of the walls of HP, had this vision of how programmatic could be the perfect form of advertising, right? Right place, right time, landing perfectly in the decision path, right when you want it, and how that has gotten kind of creepy in advertising, but they went so deep into that vision that they literally shut down all of their linear TV. They were just so excited about it, and all the time had providers telling them from an ABM perspective, I can get you in front of IT decision makers across the country at the moment they're, looking to make decisions. So he was questioning whether or not they could do that effectively, and even what they had done in the past was truly effective. And so he partnered with MIT and the University of Melbourne, and they used 6 data providers. He didn't name them, but he said they're likely, if you named the biggest ones, you probably are hitting at least 5 out of 6. And he segmented this test into 3 with ABM account lists, 3 kind of off-the-shelf IT decision maker audiences, and then 1 control audience, which was just US Census modeled. And at the end of this, asked through a survey, just trying to understand, do these people really work for the company that we assumed they were working for? Do they work in IT? Do they even work? They found that 63% of these people were unemployed. 8% worked in IT. Again, that was their target. 66% of them worked in small to medium-sized businesses, and they were targeting enterprise. 16% claimed to delete their cookies. 32% claimed to use ad blockers. And from a performance standpoint, their 45 to 54 age target was the best performing at a 20% conversion rate, far beyond anything else they saw. And a lot of the segments that they had performed worse than just if they would have targeted the entire US census population, like no targeting, basically. And so he talked about this data and how it revolutionized how they think. They are still doing, he was careful to say, like, not all targeting is bad. And so, but to be skeptical, right? Don't wait for the cookie to die. Use second party data, look at publisher data, and don't be afraid of leaning into targeting practices like contextual would be one. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I think it's so crazy that only 8% worked in IT.
Mm-hmm. 8%.
Nuts. And then the amount unemployed was like, geez.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that more people need to realize that, because I think the challenge too with this space is when you think about, like, we like to go to, well, is it just performing as a great way to, have an indication of success and whether or not you're hitting the right people. But the device graphs are so wide now, and there's so much fragmentation of consumer data that then you're into the attribution game, and who gets credit for what. And so it just becomes this muddy space where marketers feel like they think they know what's happening and what's working and how things are performing, but do they really? And so that's why I really love this study.
Right. And it's tough because as a marketer, you think, well, I should try to target. It makes sense to reach people who are in market for your product or in your category. So the principles behind it are sound, but are marketers pausing to ask? I mean, it's sad that they have to, but they have to stop and ask. You want to believe that this data is accurate, but I think HP just proved that if you're dependent on large amounts of this data, you're going to want to check to see how accurate it is, because it might not be.
Absolutely. Yep. Just, be picking apart data and being skeptical, as he had talked about. So I would definitely encourage anyone he'll do a much better job telling that story. But the spirit is there of, this is not all it sometimes seems. And that there's opportunity beyond having super specific micro-targeted ad placements, behaviorally driven targeting, right person at the right time is just probably kind of a silver bullet that doesn't exist.
Right. And we're pretty big fans of contextual targeting too, right? As a TV agency, I think a lot of marketers might not be thinking about how well contextual could work for them. I mean, we're working on a new product right now that's based around contextual targeting because it works. You reach a larger audience, and turns out when you target people based on interests and themes like the content they're consuming, you're usually hitting who you want to hit. So I think this might be a good opportunity for brands to ask themselves, are we utilizing contextual targeting? You're going to protect the consumer. You're not going to get involved with all these data privacy issues, and it could be something to add to your marketing mix.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. And I think it's too, like, when you think about it from a marketer's perspective, you don't need to know that someone bought something from Patagonia to track them around the internet. And something, if you're doing the right research and really understanding your core consumer, a Patagonia shopper is indicative of a lot of other things from a behavior standpoint. And that's where contextual can become really important and really effective. Right.
So one thing I wanted to end on is a question for you, Rob, actually. When I posted this on LinkedIn, I got a lot of comments about, this is old news. We know that this type of tracking is happening and it doesn't work. And some negativity around the thought of this causing any sort of change. What's your thought on that? Do you think this study, this article, is this big news for marketers?
I don't know. I think it's helpful when you have a third party like a university talking about something that we talk about all the time and validate it. It's sort of like the conversation around alcohol. Like everybody knows alcohol is probably going to kill you or it's not great for you. But then the study gets published right now and all of a sudden it's like huge news. It's like, don't drink any alcohol, whatever. Sorry, I don't want to. That's a different topic. Not opening that can of worms, Elena. But the point being, it's probably new news from that standpoint. But the demise of the cookie has been talked about for a long time, and I think the question of really whether or not how is behavioral advertising or targeting going to evolve when the cookie's gone is maybe even a more interesting dialogue down the road because. Whether or not we're going to still be debating this when the cookie's gone and it maybe migrates over to the IP address or whatever and the privacy around that, I think is really going to be the bigger story down the road.
Right. I'd agree with you. And I also think that there is a certain snowball effect to this stuff. And I don't think it's a bad thing to bring it up and talk about it. Some things are old news, but it just takes a long time for people to hear about it. And all of a sudden it clicks. And to me, that makes it worth it to talk about a topic like this because it is very relevant for marketers. And if you can work ahead on it, it's just going to serve you down the road when we do say goodbye to cookies. If we do, probably.
What do you think, Rob? Are you ready to apply for your next position at Viant? Are you all?
Oh, I'm all in. As long as we're talking, as long as cookies are the same thing the Cookie Monster's talking about, then yeah, I think I'm ready.
All right, there's too much to dive into with that at the moment, so let's wrap things up. That's it for this episode of The Marketing Architects. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, and if you find our show valuable, please leave us a rating and review. And if you want to know what the research says about some recent news, you can contact us at marketingarchitects.com/podcast. Now go forth and build great marketing.